Why don't we go ahead and call the meeting to order? We have a fair number of items on the agenda today, so get started. We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the July minutes. Those minutes have been circulated and are available. Are there any additions or corrections to the July minutes? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. The next item is the public agenda. I did not see a sign up when I came in. I see the sheet, but I hadn't seen anybody sign up. Has anybody signed?
My name on it.
Okay, all right, it was empty when I came in. So, all right, well, we have a public agenda. And by the way, we are going to have at the last board meeting, we decided to try to have a more ordered presentation. And so we'll have the public agenda, try to keep your speeches to 3 minutes. And then when we consider individual items, we'll allow public comment on those too. But we're going to try to do it in a little bit more structured way. That's one of the reasons we flipped the chairs, because now I can see who wants to raise their hand and we can control the process a little better. It's not intended to cut off any comment per se, it's just to be a little bit more orderly. So go ahead. And by the way, we are on the police YouTube channel now, so to assist, I think we'll also ask, even though we know who you are, for you to state your name before you give your presentation.
Still up here?
That's where the mic is, it would be better, yes, please.
So my name is Twyla Purity, and just different comments and so forth today. Bender's recap of where the CRB has been, and I thought was awesome. It's great to know where you've been. I think maybe the next thing, and I don't know if it's as clear, it's certainly not to me, but I'm not on the board, like where do you want to go, right? What's your future goals for this? You spend time, picking cases to look at, in your private session. And I don't even know, and it's not, I don't have to know, but, what are you looking for? Are you looking for the bad apples? Are you looking for procedural? Are you looking for training? Maybe if you could state that or kind of come up with what it is that you're looking for. Let's see. I think you'll notice actually you guys did a really great thing when you asked Captain Nicholson to go ahead and kind of give some of this data and break it out by bureau. You'll see that on the reports that are presented this month, so I think that's probably a really great place to start. Another idea I had, my guess is the chief and other, I don't know, I don't live in the civic or the government world, managers, for lack of whatever the right word is, I'm sure they get all sorts of reports, right? I'm assuming on these complaints and so forth. So instead of us maybe recreating it, or meaning you all, not us, maybe you could just see what they look at. My guess is they're probably looking at data that may be a little more robust. Just another idea. Another thing, as you kind of define exactly what you're looking for, maybe exactly what you want to accomplish. Maybe you ask for data on the top 10, 25, 50 officers who've had the most complaints. Where do they fall? What's their bureau? Is it a training thing? Is it, some other kind of problem? That you might be able to help the department ferret out and improve things. I did something, and then I left it at my office. So I took the monthly reports for the entire year and then entered the data for each month. I did it for the incident type and the classification. And I did on one other thing. I was so proud of it, and I printed them out. I was going to bring them, but it was hectic at the office. We're moving into our new surgery center tomorrow, so I left it. But I can tell you, first of all, I think you'll notice, even if you look at this, And it works if you're looking at a long range of time. But like you're meeting, the data that you get is in kind of different chunks, right? So on this report, this is range of complaints from July 16th to July 31st. Pretty short period of time. And there's other months where it's longer. It's neither good nor bad. You know, it's kind of curious the way it works. But maybe it would be beneficial to look at the data like calendar month or, you know, middle of one month to the middle of the next, just some ideas. But back to the point, you know, over, 12 months or 6 months, it's kind of pretty much average out. Even though I didn't bring it, I know on incident type, the external, when we look at the first 6 months, or 7 months, I guess, of 2021 versus all of 2020, the monthly average of external complaints was about identical. Internal complaints for the same period of time, the comparison, an average of about 2 less per month on internal complaints when compared to 2020. That was just something that I happen to remember. Oh, gosh, yeah. And another thing that was curious, so if you look at the date range for complaints closed July 16th to July 31st, the first one, so it took about 10 months, for something to happen with this particular officer. But there's kind of a little disconnect. Under allegations, force, and type, it says sustained and suspension. But then the narrative under summary said it resulted in a diversion. Maybe those are the same things. I don't know. Are they? Police fellers? No, okay. But it's on the same, the same event or the same complaint. And then the next one, it took, 7 months to figure out, which is, you just don't really have enough information, right? Like, why would it take 7 months for this one and maybe not as long? Maybe you care, maybe you don't. The other thing that I thought was interesting, so if you look at the fourth one down, handling evidence and personal property, and then kind of the next to the last one, the description is identical. So I guess they leave citizens' cell phones on their tops of their cars, like, more often than we would guess, right? But the identical complaints, March and July, a little different. In one says sustained with a written reprimand, the other one stipulated written reprimand. Anyway, just some things that jumped out when I was looking at this. So that's kind of it. Just some ideas. Thank you.
Walt, you raise your hand? Oh.
Mr. Chair, did you want any clarification on one of the points that she brought up?
Which is that?
The 7-month-old case, the diversion pertained to the misdemeanor, the suspension pertained to the WPD's discipline.
That's right. Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am LaWanda DeShazer, and I really wanted to hold my comments until after we have the presentation. So I just want to thank the Citizens Review Board. I want to thank WPD for listening to us and taking a good look at our professional standards at the process of when someone makes a complaint. How it's handled, how do we communicate with the citizens? So I'm just going to up front say we appreciate you guys listening to us and actually trying to do something about it. So I may have something to say after the report, but right now I just want to say thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other people?
Hi, my name is Walt Chappell. I'm currently the Vice President, Vice Chair of the Racial Profiling Advisory Board. The board already knows this. I'll let you know as well that at the end of this month, I'm going to resign my position as Vice Chair and work in the background, try to help wherever I can, but turn over a lot of those day-to-day activities to someone else. We've got really good leaders in our community, and I'm hopeful that we'll work together with your board and others. My concern today is twofold. First of all, we still don't have the citation data. And I'm sure you're concerned about that as I am. It was promised, your motion back in February was to have it in April. Well, here we are in August and still don't have it. And I understand it takes some time to work things out and go through analysis. I've been doing that stuff all my life. But that isn't an excuse. You have to know, and we do too, has there been any improvements since the analysis was done on the 2016 through 2018 data? And those data, of course, show that blacks are twice as likely to be stopped in this city and given a citation than any other race. And that 50% of those citations are for non-moving violations. Now, I'm hopeful that you folks will get those data next month, in September. I'm not sure what the reasoning will be at that time, Mr. Chairman, but I'm sure you'll have a chance to talk it over at that point. The second thing I wanted to bring up is the fact that throughout the last 23 years, I started doing this work in 1998. And I'm aware, as you are, that in those 23 years, there's a double standard. You and I, as citizens, if we're stopped for any reason, that's immediately known. And if there's anything that the cameras from the TV stations can get action on, they'll get out there, they'll send a reporter, and they'll say, all right, what happened and who did what to whom, and pretty soon you got a face up on the screen. Oh, that's the guy. We got him. Sometimes within minutes, if not hours, within a day or two, we'll know, quote, who is the accused person that committed this violation of our standards. We call it a crime, whatever it is, they did something we didn't like. So we send the police out and they make an arrest. That's immediately known. Same way with traffic stops. Some of you know the name Hearst LaViana. Now, Hearst was a reporter for Wichita Eagle. Dennis, you're knocking your head. I think you know who I'm talking about. He loved data. Man, he would just mine it. He was good at it. And so they posted on the Wichita Eagle website all of the traffic citations for everyone within municipal court. And of course, they can do it the same way for the district court, Sedgwick County. And sure enough, you can put in your name and boom, immediately you're going to see all the traffic citations you've had for the last 15, 20 years. Now that data is also, of course, available through the Kansas Department of Revenue. They keep track of all the traffic stops that people have. Long story short, that's public information. It's publicly disclosed. On the flip side of that, if you have an officer that we have an external complaint, it's buried. We have not been able to get hardly any information on any officer except through continued effort to talk with people behind the scenes. And we have found some officers that have like 23 complaints against them, and they're still getting promoted. There's a pattern and practice here of behavior on the part of some of these officers that need to stop. But you and I, as citizens, we don't know that. You're a review board. You're charged with the responsibility of finding that information. So that's important that you get that out. Now, on some cases, those cases are actually brought to the civil court. And since 2003, there's some like, I think, 53 or so cases that have been made public only to the extent that they're now part of the public record. So-and-so has been charged as a defendant, and the citizen is the plaintiff, not the other way around, right? If an officer arrests somebody, that person arrested is the defendant. In this case, we have a police officer who has been accused of excessive use of force or killing somebody on the job, like the Karis Randolph case, okay, like Karen Jackson case. Each of these cases now are being adjudicated in the courts. The problem is that you'll never get to see it. As a review board, you don't get it till it's all finished, right? And even then, supposedly you can't look at anything over a year old. What I'm leading to is this. There needs to be an analysis given to us of the legal expenses the taxpayers of Wichita are paying to defend police officers. On July 29th of last year, we made that request of the city manager. That request was granted. We've been working with Dante Martin. He said, yes, we'll get it for you. You don't have to do a core request. We'll make this something. We'll get it to you. In August, we had Charlie Davidson give us a list of expenses that they had itemized through the finance department. They had only spent about an hour and a half. 2014, that family had 19 people in their front yard. That man was shot. When they called for ComCare, they got 2 officers. And one pulled out his gun and shot him right there in his front yard. Now, I'm going to stop my comments right now and let you have a chance to mull that over. But I would hope that you'll bring this to a head today, and please ask the city attorney to complete that analysis, provide it to you, make it public so we'll all know what we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We normally reserve 15 minutes for a public agenda, and we are now past that, so I'm ready to move on and everyone else is, because we have a full agenda. The next item is...
Excuse me, sir. We have 2 more people to speak.
And I have a question. So that 15 minutes, like, is that established by, I don't know, the order that's set up this committee, or is it just something internal that you'll decide?
It was an internal guideline we set at the very beginning. If somebody else wants to talk, we're not here to cut people off, but I would, if somebody else wants, please keep it to 3 minutes, because we have a lot to do and we won't get it done. Yes, sir. All right. Pastor?
Good afternoon, everyone. I need no introduction, as I served for 7 years. Of course, I'm a citizen review board, and the last 3 in the board, Ramsey as its vice chair. And so, good afternoon. The reason why I'm here today is because in February, my last month of services, there was a motion that I put forth that was seconded by Sharon, and that motion and it was voted on and approved. And the gist of the motion was that the recommendations by the Citizen Review Board would be retrieved from the minutes and captured by city staff in a one-page document listing basically date and description of the recommendations that have been made by the board. And it's again 6 months later. Okay, that was in February that was again voted on and approved. Here we are in August. I want to know, how do I get a copy of that? Is that something I have to make a core request for? Or has it been completed by city staff? What's the status of it? Because, again, my service is completed. I want to be able to look back and say my time was not wasted. I was part of these recommendations, and then I can know whether any of them were acted upon, any changes made in accordance with those recommendations, and so on and so forth. So again, my question is, how do I get a copy of that document listing date and description of the recommendations the board has made? Thank you.
Thank you. Pastor Sims, as a result of your that recommendation or policy, we now attach to the back of the minutes a identification of record of recommendations and motions. So to the back of each minute that is ultimately posted on the internet, there will be an identification of the date of the recommendation and what it was. Anyone else like to speak? All right, the next item on the agenda is staff report. Captain Nicholson.
Hey, good afternoon, I'm Captain Nicholson. Lieutenant Wareheim actually did a lot of work based off of some suggestions that were made as far as how we, data that we present. We break down foreclosed complaints through July 16th through July 31st. We had 19 external complaints and 11 internal complaints. And you can see the breakdown as far as what was sustained and what wasn't. On the back page, we have it broken down by bureau and division. And so you can see of those complaints that, is that year to date, Lieutenant Wareheim? Is that just last month?
2 weeks.
Okay, so through those closing entries, we had 5 officers in the investigations division that were investigated for a regulation violation, 2 from the Central Bureau, 15 from Patrol East. We had 6 from Patrol North, 6 from Patrol South, and 3 from Patrol West. And so we had a total number of 37 employees that were investigated out of 854 employees. And as you can see from the regulations, I think the most common one was compliant with policy. Then you had 5 handling evidence, and then a smattering of care of equipment. We had 2 that were investigated for committing a misdemeanor crime, and then we had 3 for good judgment.
Captain, is there any, the Patrol East stands out, but I don't know why. Is there any unusual thing going on there?
Well, I would say that all of the bureaus, like in my bureau, we're down 21 officers, and so I think East also has a lot of openings, and so they have a lot of young officers, and so a lot of the violations that, same as with my bureau, I have a lot of young officers that don't follow policy as far as turning in evidence or just accidents, those sorts of things. So just kind of comes with the territory, just having just a bunch of 21-year-old kids that are out trying to do the right thing, but mess up with our voluminous regulation manual.
I see that the largest item, number of regulation violations is comply with policy. What generally does that mean?
Comply with policy, I mean, that could be, just, what would be some examples that we're on? Yes, so so now, I know this year, when we first got the body cameras, we were doing, we were just kind of counseling people, but now we give them work demands if officers aren't activating their body cameras. So if something comes up and we look into it, then we find that an officer forgot to turn in their body camera, that's resulting in discipline now.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
So Matt, the body camera commission, for context, and when I explain the number of officers in each one of the bureaus, because I think you have one of the largest ones, right? And then we can kind of be, or are they all equal in size?
They're somewhat equal. It's supposed to be on paper, but with retirements, people quitting, those sorts of things, just like I have the 20 openings in my bureau, but they all are pretty much around 85 to 90 officers in each bureau. The patrol bureaus. Investigation has 100 detectives.
Board members have any other questions?
I'd like to thank the lieutenant for presenting the data in this format. It's helpful.
So with the answer to the question on 61st, the reason why I did it that way is just trying to get on the calendar. If it was an odd number for how much time it was on the calendar.
Makes perfect sense.
Next time.
All right, very good. All right, that's it? Next item is Sergeant Lewis.
Good evening, I'm Sergeant Lemons. I work at Patrol North third shift. I will be presenting information gathered from the Racial Profiling Advisory Board. I was contacted by them at one of the meetings a couple months ago, and I advised I would assist them. We've had several meetings, and the last meeting they came up with a couple of different options. I'll go over these options for these disposition letters, or at least options in which they would like to see them work. They presented 3 different materials. First is the acknowledgement of complaint. The second one is the assignment of complaint, and the third is the letter of disposition. Looking first at the acknowledgement of complaint letter, which is the initial acknowledgement after a complaint comes from the citizen. They had several different suggestions that they recommended. First being the official date of complaint that was filed. The second the reference number for which that complaint was filed, and then some of the other ones are already within the database on the computer system. For instance, they requested a English and Spanish version. Both of those are already on that database. One of the newer ones was a witness information. The third is a link for videos that they requested for it to be uploaded for citizens. Looking at the signed complaint, which will kind of work in unison of the acknowledgement of complaint letter, that there, again, looking at some of the same components, they're asking for a certain time frame in which that date the complaint is to be received. They're asking who the case is assigned to as well be acknowledged, and then other supporting documents that may be needed as well. These two letters, just kind of background the acknowledgement of complaint and signed complaint, they may work simultaneously within Professional Standards Bureau, depending upon when contact is made with the citizen. But nevertheless, these are the letters that they're asking be sent out. The last one, which is the letter for disposition, again, some of the same things you'll find in there, the sign number, or the reference number rather. They're asking for a little bit more additional information, such as the investigator's name and how the investigation proceeded. They're also looking for information regarding policy in which the detective, how they came up with their resolution to the investigation as well. They also wanted a last review process with the CRB, and enclosed in that brochure with contact information. And then there's some other language in the back that they wanted as far as the policy that was used to come up with the findings of the officer being investigated. Again, this is just an overview of these three documents: the acknowledgement of complaint, the assignment of complaint, and the disposition letter. The reason for presentation is to see if there's any more additional feedback from the board or any citizens that can be recorded or be helpful before these three documents are sent upline.
Any comments or questions from the board? I think these are good letters. I think they're significantly improved from the historical practice. Anybody else? Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Wareheim. She can speak for herself, but actually, I don't want to talk for you. Tell what you have already changed as far as the letter, as far as
the Spanish version at present, that was already on the website, so that's available. The Spanish version was already provided for for you guys. It's already there. You wanted to add witnesses, so we got that. It's already done. It's already listed on there for you. All you have to do is push yes, and then it'll pop up the population, put in the name and address and phone numbers. If you wish to add more, you just have to hit add another, and it'll keep on adding as many as you want. We could not use to download a video just due to computer reasons, which is not my forte, so I won't even try to explain it. But we're going to ask a question, do you have a video, yes or no? That way, when those are signed out, they'll know to get with the person and ask, hey, we need to somehow get together to get that video. So those have already been done, taken care of.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
This is moving in the right direction in lots of good ways. I've only ever filed one formal report with PSB. It was years ago, before you guys started on this process. The letter I got back, if I wasn't a lawyer or a police officer, made no sense whatsoever other than to say, no, for reasons. It didn't explain it nearly this well, so congratulations for working towards that process. Normal people can read this, and that's the people who are submitting these complaints are regular citizens, so we're doing great. I think there's one opportunity to improve communication and understanding based on my understanding of this process. On the letter of disposition, the proposed wording is, after a thorough investigation, we find the information provided, is, sustained, or, it ends up with the dispositions after that. I think it may be good to differentiate that the role of the PSB is investigatory only. The we find, that decision is made by command staff. I think it would be, I'm not sure how to word it, but I think it'd be very appropriate to say the WPD command staff has evaluated the investigation materials provided by the PSB, and command staff, based on that, they made the decision. I think the we is a little ambiguous, and I think we can take a little heat off of PSB. They gather the facts, command staff makes the decision.
All right.
Just my idea.
Thank you.
And I like that as well. I know that in my conversations I had with Mr. Shazer, that in previous administrations that we've had, we haven't been as, I know we discussed that we didn't really get the community's input on these letters, and so, which is what we're trying to do right now. As far as when saying we find, I know that Lieutenant Wareheim would tell you that her office doesn't actually make the decisions, and it's not even the command staff. Actually, it was the final decision rests with the executive staff, so the deputy chiefs and the chief. So I wouldn't have a problem with changing and putting that wording in there, but I'm not the chief, so that's going to ultimately be up to him. But I like that decision. I like that suggestion.
All right, anything else on this topic?
Even after working with the CRB for several months, it took me a while to truly understand and appreciate the various findings and their definitions. On the letter of disposition that was referenced earlier, the fourth paragraph, not to be too much in wordsmithing, but the sentence in bold, therefore our findings are, quote, not sustained, undisdained defined, there is insufficient evidence. I was confused when one determination is not sustained, and then the definition is used for unsustained.
I can say the only thing about those, the way it's written, it's not on our policy. The way those are written currently right now, if you compare that, the way it's written on here versus our policy, they're written in two separate ways. However, to answer your question, ask it one more time and I can answer it.
Well, should the definition be for not sustained rather than unsustained?
Well, yeah, it should, there's, our policy has four. What we do is unfounded, not sustained, sustained, and exonerated. Those are only our four, and that's how it's written. And we have our definition and our policy that it would have to change to match policy. But not sustained means that it wasn't true. I mean, we couldn't, not enough evidence to prove one way or another.
Okay, we're getting too deep into the weeds here.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is, yes, sir.
I just want to say one other little thing.
All right.
Again, I just want to thank everyone for the work that's been. And the other thing that we haven't. I think we were told it was designed like 12 years ago. The actual brochure, if you go to the, it's going up. Can you hear me? Yeah. I think they said it hasn't been updated in over 12 years. And so again, maybe some of the language may be a little outdated, and it may be a way to make it easier for citizens to understand. And then it references the Citizens Review Board as the final step if you're not pleased with your finding. But we weren't quite sure what that means. And so that's something you guys talked about among yourself, like
I think the short answer to that is we haven't had it happen, even though it's been available. But the citizen would ask that the case be reviewed, and then we would identify it for review, and so we would review it. We review it in executive session because we are required to. I think we generally agreed on a process that the citizen could provide information as part of that process, but it would, in all likelihood, be an executive session process. I think that's the protocol we ultimately reached up.
I get it, but if you look at the brochure, it's so outdated. The average citizen may not understand. So just something to look at again as you guys are moving forward.
All right, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is review of draft report on accomplishments by the CRB. Denny Bender did a good job. What I think we want to do is simply all have an opportunity to comment on it or make suggestions, because I think the idea is we would post it. And so the floor is open to board members about any comments or suggestions regarding the current draft.
That was the intent, that it be made available to the public as a report card, so to speak. And I don't purport that this is totally comprehensive or all-inclusive. I did use the minutes of 3.5 years worth of our meetings to compose this. Some of the statistics were based on my tallying them through each of the minutes. They were not necessarily generated by Wichita Police Department reports. But if you spot something that you question, there is one approximation in here about in total more than 1,000 citizen and departmental complaints were screened. I'm waiting for the exact total from PSB. I've asked for that. So that will be included in the final version that's posted.
All right. Are there other thoughts or comments on this draft? Yes, ma'am. If you want to be on the YouTube feed, you need to use the mic.
It doesn't matter to me. So I guess I'll just go.
So on the first page, about halfway down, was doing the board reviewed and commented. So when you commented on them, did the department, take into consideration your comments is a question. And then when you get down to you recommended, did the board or did the department, accept your recommendations or not? That's kind of I'm curious about that. And then at the bottom, other accomplishments and recommendations, kind of the same thing. Did the department then follow through on your recommendations or even respond back to you? These were your recommendations. This thing doesn't work, but these were your recommendations. Yes, no, or just go silent.
All right. I can give you a general answer to the question. The comments are, during the process of the review, we ask questions and we make comments and we engage with the presenter and the command staff to the extent they're here about the conduct, and we have a pretty good dialogue about it. If there is a situation where we think the information has not been adequate, we've had the department actually come back and provide more information and respond to our inquiries. We've had members of the command staff actually be asked to come who weren't there to come and explain the situation to us. And we proceeded in that manner. That's how we had that dialogue. Of course, all of those, unfortunately or fortunately or whatever, it doesn't matter. The rule is that that exchange of information is confidential under our ordinance. So we, as it relates to specific individual cases, we cannot publish that information. Now, we do and we can make a policy recommendation in which, sometimes that happens, but that's not specific to an individual case. And if we make a policy recommendation, then that goes into public session. So that's the process.
Okay, that's helpful. And I appreciate that you can't recommend, or you can't comment on that. There is, right, you talk about something here, you ask something for them, and then you make sure it gets moved forward to the next agenda.
Well, we ask questions, and we generally are satisfied with the information provided, and we have had situations where we have specifically carried over matters for further inquiry because we want more information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the posting of the report?
So I think, I don't know, just a minor thing, like in the first paragraph here, it says completed the 12th month. I think it was 12 weeks, right? The WPD Citizens Police Academy was just 12 weeks.
It takes a year.
Did it?
No, it's 12 weeks. Yeah, it's 12 weeks.
Okay, the period of time, calendar-wise, it's 12 months. It's once a month.
Yeah, once.
No?
No, it was once a week.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, it was once a week.
All right.
12 weeks.
So noted. My
Make
error.
that change.
I don't remember if it was 12, but I remember it was once a week for a series of weeks, but it wasn't a whole year.
Right,
No, it wasn't a whole, it was like a semester,
right.
Yeah.
more like it.
All right, any other suggestions or corrections? Is there a motion to have this posted as corrected and with the 1,000 figure fixed as well?
So moved.
Seconded? Any further discussion?
I have a question, though, is this your final draft? You said you were waiting for some information on this.
Only on the actual number of
Yeah,
complaints
so-
that were presented to us over that 3.5-year
Yeah.
period.
So this isn't quite a final draft.
Right, my notion is the motion we would simply make the two corrections we've
Okay.
identified and then have it posted without further action.
Okay.
And that's
got
what
you.
I moved.
That's what, Mr. Lopez moved. Any further comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll do that.
Thanks, Denny.
The next item on the agenda is a proposal for a policy change or policy change recommendation. And this relates to the police discipline process and the arbitration and grievance process. And there's a discussion paper that's been prepared and circulated in advance of the meeting. The purpose of the discussion paper was, in essence, to, I guess, summarize the process and the current procedures utilized, but also include what I think are some observations by the CRB about how the process currently works. And so as you read this paper, you'll see statements about the community interest in transparency, the police officer interest in fair discipline proceedings. You'll see statements about the current policy of confidentiality. You'll see a statement about the legal requirements related to that. There's a paragraph about the good reasons why confidentiality might be appropriate. and that it may be beneficial in certain contexts, particularly in a personnel kinds of proceeding relationship. There's a paragraph about while current policy mandates confidentiality, the WPD has now, as part of this process, engaged in providing us with a roster of complaints, including identification of numbers, case numbers, and the nature of the complaint and the resolution and discipline, which are now public, although they do not identify the specific officers, and that we use that. And there's also an identification of the restrictions on the ordinance. There's an identification of how we have been able to generally evaluate the cases that we've identified, and that the department's been cooperative with us in that regard, and identifying the fact that the Axon video has been very helpful to us because we've all been able to see, in most cases, the conduct that was complained about. And then there's a question, a rhetorical question, about how confidential some of this should be, and that, should we consider potential changes based on a transparency component. And so that's what this is about. And so as we were preparing this draft, we identified two policies for discussion. And one is whether or not the discipline records for serious misconduct or use of excessive force should be considered public at some level. And the way the recommendation for policy change is written, it recognizes that it is, I think, premature to make a specific policy, a formal policy statement, because there'll need to be a definition of what a serious misconduct or what constitutes use of excessive force. And so there'd be some administrative things to work out. So the policy suggestion is that that the city staff grapple with those definitional issues, but that the CRB recommends that they be made public at some level. And what the recommendation really is saying is that those records would no longer be subject to confidentiality under CORA because the city would make a policy decision that they weren't confidential. That's point one. The second point that relates to this proposal is the grievance and arbitration procedure under the FOP contract and the Wichita Human Resources policy. And part of that FOP contract was provided with the materials, but we've read several times in the past. And in essence, that once the discipline process has been completed and the department, the chief acting as the decision maker at that level, has
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Has made a final decision, the officer has the ability to go through a formal arbitration and grievance procedure. And as we were drafting this and considering it, that is it's akin to, in my view anyway, to a lawsuit or an administrative proceeding against the city. And I thought in that context that it might be appropriate to make a policy recommendation, even if you don't address the first one, and that you would make a policy recommendation that the arbitration and grievance proceedings against the city become public, at least no longer subject to the CORA exemption for confidentiality. And the thought process there is that the community would have an interest in understanding how the process works and making sure the process is fair. If there's a grievance procedure, the officer involved has an interest in not being unfairly treated. And the allegation, of course, would be that the discipline was unfair in some fashion. This board and the community in general would be interested in both things. They would be interested in how are cases like this being handled in this kind of a adjudicatory process, and they would be interested in determining whether or not police management is being arbitrary in the way they administer the disciplinary process. Those are both competing considerations, I think. So the final recommendation, or the second policy recommendation for consideration, is that those kinds of grievance and arbitration proceedings that are conducted pursuant to Article 14 of the FOP contract be matters of public record. Both of these recommendations as drafted still include a redaction procedure where personally identifiable information for non-parties or the witnesses and things like that could be protected as to confidentiality. So here it is. This is a discussion draft, and I would like the comments from the board about how they feel about either one of these proposed policies, or if you have an issue with the way the discussion paper is drafted and you think it unfairly characterizes the background presentation, or something more needs to be said, now is the time to start talking about this. We have visited about this issue at multiple meetings. We've had presentations about the issue. So I thought maybe it's time to make it an agenda item. Thoughts?
Well, I read through the discussion paper several times to make sure I understand what was the background as well as what was being presented. And I support both of the recommendations. And I personally think that these could be two of the most important and impactful actions that we could take in the 3.5 years I've been on the CRB. I do have a question as to, all right, we make the recommendation. Are these recommendations filed with the city manager, with city council, with the city attorney? What would be the next step?
Well, we would pass it by resolution, and it would go, I mean, the way it's drafted, it would go to the WPD, the city manager, and the city council. Our authority generally is to make recommendations to the city manager. That's who we report to, but the proposal's drafted a bit broader than that. We don't have, as everyone knows, we're an advisory board. We do not have the authority to make a change, so that's the way it's drafted in that way. Any other board members have a thought?
I would concur with Mr. Bender in having served on the board the same amount of time. I read it multiple times just to make sure I had misunderstood, and would concur with what Mr. Bender is saying in terms of supporting what is written. I think the spirit by which it was drafted attempts to balance those nuances that you have shared with us in preparation for the discussion, and see no reason, at least presently, unless someone has another opinion that might change my mind, for us not to consider moving forward with this.
I mean, can I ask what you personally, why do you like it?
I think there is this balance that has to occur between the fact that we have employees and we also have public servants, and this idea that has been drafted kind of tries to balance the confidentiality, recognizing there will always be situations where confidentiality will supersede what we would like to know versus what we'd like to know in order to be able to make informed decisions. And I think this attempts to find that balance without skewing it one way or the other, because public opinion tends to skew the ability for us to be able to move forward on certain agenda items and certain aspects that the city is involved with all the time. And this, I think, is a good basis by which we could attempt to do the things that we want to do, certainly the things that we all aspired to do when we first joined, and still find that balance that has to happen when we try to balance the needs versus the desire and attempting to find that sometimes amenable solution that is always elusive at times. And I think this does a good job of setting that stage or that tone.
John, do you have any comments?
No.
Paul?
Right now, I don't. I haven't put in the serious consideration that they have talked about. I've read it, but I haven't. I'm still processing how I feel about it.
All right. Ricardo?
No, I'm still thinking about it. As I look at it and I'm listening to what people are saying about it, I'm thinking about where it goes from here. It's a suggestion. That's what I'm getting from that, and ultimately we make a decision about submitting this. How does it benefit? Who does it benefit?
Yeah, I think that, and that's a legitimate point, I think that it is a transparency point. I think the arbitration and grievance section particularly has a benefit to the department generally that may be unique to the department because it puts a little bit of sunshine on some what I would call city litigation. The Washington Post says democracy dies in darkness. And at some point, a little sunshine, particularly in a process which is like a claim against the city, I think is legitimate from both the officer perspective and the citizen perspective. That's one point. It is tough, and it's tough from the standpoint of, so many of the discipline things the officers have don't really weigh on whether the officer's unfit or not. I mean, all the 21-year old officers that Wendell has who are trying to figure out how to buckle their shoes, and get in trouble, or Captain Pinkston, or now Deputy Chief Pinkston, who once told us that he got suspended for wrecking a car. Those kinds of things are different, and they're personnel matters. And I only say that because he said it in an open meeting. But so those are issues. We'll get to you in a minute. So anyway, I think we should discuss this. We don't have to make a decision today. But the one reason why it's being advanced now, besides it may be just time to consider it, is that the FOP contract is coming up for review. And if we're going to have some input into that process, doing it sooner rather than later is appropriate.
Will we be able to have input into that process? I'm asking questions. Like I said, I'm new to this, so that's why I'm curious about a lot of things.
We are an advisory board, and so all we can do is recommend. I think if the advisory board makes a recommendation, there will be people that will say, the advisory board's made a recommendation, so we need to do this. Somebody else might say, well, no, but if you don't make a recommendation, then maybe it takes some pressure off. Maybe it's, this might be a tool somebody could use. It's going to be the city council and the city manager ultimately that makes those kinds of decisions. We are not going to make a final decision. So.
The only thing I would add, the benefit is to the public, ultimately. And we need to start moving in the direction of where we know we need to go. We're advising, but we need to start doing something, otherwise we're just spinning and we have for 3.5 years in some ways. We've made a lot of progress, good partners in our officers, but we've got to do something beyond just speak about maybe this, maybe that. Some of the 3.5 years has been just defining who we are, and we're still trying to in some ways. But I think this is a step closer to the things that we all aspired to want to be a part of when we first started this. But if we don't take this first step, we're just prolonging the inevitable. Eventually, we have to get somewhere. It may get nowhere with city council, but I can at least say, we can at least say we're trying. So to answer your first question, the public.
I certainly agree with Mr. Lopez. We are appointed by and serve the city manager on this review board, but inherent to our responsibilities is an obligation to the citizens of this community to assure them that reasonable review, accountability, and transparency is part of our operation. And when we have to result to executive session and things that we can't discuss in public, it just furthers the concern that all that is possible isn't being done. And I think adoption of these two recommendations would move us much closer to satisfying what I feel is a profound obligation to our fellow citizens to know that there is review and accountability being exercised.
Other comments? Members of the community have a comment? Yes, sir.
I think a little bit of an exception to number 9, when you talk about for discussion purposes, CRB protecting the pharmaceutical rule of confidentiality as to police discipline and personnel matters is appropriate need not be changed. I see a difference between police discipline and personnel matters. Those are not one and the same. So I think I would like to see that for, I mean, that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about being transparent, the public has the right to know what type of discipline is being utilized for officers who are violating policy or who are charged with and maybe excessive abuse, excessive force. It's not a personnel matter.
Pastor Sims, here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a former member of the board and a member of the general community, I think these are excellent recommendations. I commend you knowing the organization of the board as an advice.
Serious conduct for use of excessive force. Just as an idea, other jurisdictions don't wrestle with that definition. They pay attention to what was the discipline. You brought up Chet earlier. One of the biggest things I learned from Chet is the whole point of coaching and mentoring is that we get better officers out of the deal. And I would posit that most of the general public doesn't really need to see a report where an officer got talked to by his boss because 2 years ago he forgot to turn on his axon. Whereas we've been told that as of now, you don't turn on your axon. You've had 2 years to learn that this is a requirement, that we need that evidence so that we know what's going on. So what other jurisdictions have done is they based it on the amount of discipline. And in case you haven't seen it, for us, that is Regulation 2, Disciplinary Code Penalty, something, city's website, which is where I'm reading from. Discipline can range from counseling, coaching and mentoring, all the way up to dismissal from the department. My idea would be that you work on whoever needs to make a decision, drawing the line. For example, we could say that if you receive coaching and mentoring, that's not a publicly reportable event. If you receive 1 day of suspension, and maybe not. Let's just, for the fun of it, pick a number and say if you receive discipline requiring 5 days or more suspension and including dismissal, that seems to be be something that qualifies as serious misconduct. It's not having to come up with a list of do's and don'ts for the officers working in the public. It's based on the own department's disciplinary policy that says when you do something that requires this many days of discipline, that's where we draw the line that says it now becomes something that the public would be concerned about. So whether you take 1 day or 5 days or 90 days, that's what's the other jurisdiction for you. And I make that suggestion. I think that read this for a month and come back to this next month.
I really appreciate that suggestion, just because I think it's, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but it seems like being a police officer is very hard. It's a tough job, and they're put in situations that that are unlike most of us on a daily basis. And I think when they're getting coached for reasons and they're learning, the 21-year-olds are learning, I think that would be, that would be unfair, and I don't think you're calling for that.
No, I mean,
in there, but
draft is very clear that that's not what, it's intended to be a serious issue.
Yeah, I think that was my original concern about, would it, and we're trying to balance, obviously we're speaking for a community, and, we also need good officers that want to serve and want to be employed, and I wouldn't want to do something that would deter them. And I think this feels like my guess is the FOP and the police department might both struggle with this recommendation, so it seems like we might be in the right space.
Well, I mean, that was kind of my thought process, is that there does need a matter. I mean, a termination obviously is a serious discipline. That's true. But and what is excessive use of force? I mean, obviously, if somebody shoots somebody, and it's found to be inappropriate, that would be. But there's lots of in between kinds of things as well. And so I was as I was considering some of the language, I thought that needed to be refined, but maybe ought to be refined as a next step as opposed to an initial step. That was a thought process in that particular paragraph. Yes, Walt?
Mr. Chairman, I really want to thank you and the other members of this board for putting this together. It's very thoughtful. I think your concern, as public, the two things, accountability and you don't know what the discipline was. There's no accountability. You don't know this officer held accountable for their actions. You need to have both. We talk about when I'm working with the legislature, we have rats and cats. We have a whole bunch of bills that come through, much for anybody or have much meaning. This is important. So you're separating the rats and cats out, or you didn't fill your time sheet out, or you didn't get your evidence turned in on time, whatever. Those are pretty much internal. But we've always been concerned about with the racial profiling. And those are cases we have now differentiated major issue and by definition when you define substantial. You have now a yardstick on which you measure. All the rest of them don't need to have a lot of coverage. On the right track, we accomplish. And while I'm sitting in this chair, I would like to ask you that same thing. And the rest of the data on legal expenses also be discussed. Given a chance for the public to report on that.
All right. Any further discussion on this discussion paper? Do we wish to adopt the discussion paper and make the affirmative policy recommendations, or do we wish to defer it for further review?
Excuse me. Did you write this, Jay?
I might have, yes, ma'am.
Because I was going to say, I didn't have any input on it, so. But I would like to, I think the discussion has been good, And I'm not ready to vote on anything because I want to read it through some more and think on it and maybe do some research of my own. And because I think this is important, and how do I say this? It is so easy to put things on paper that in reality do not work. And it's very easy to abstractly come up with ideas sitting at home or behind your desk or wherever you do your thinking and think that sounds really good. But it is not practical or realistic to the people that have to follow it. And so, and I'm not saying that is this way. I'm just saying I want to think on it some more. I want to make sure that when we write this, that we write it as concisely and as workable as possible. We all know that they pass laws in Topeka every day that either have big holes in them or in the end, they're ridiculous. You know, who can follow that law? You know, but apparently somebody thought it looked good on paper. And so I think that I would personally like to think on it some more and perhaps come back and discuss it again. Because if all of you think on it, you may come back with other ideas. I just want this to be as good and workable as we can make it, so that we don't have somebody coming back in a year or 6 months and saying, what idiots came up with this? And I want to make sure we're not those idiots. Because I know I can do idiotic things, so I don't know about anybody else here, but so I would like to think on it, read on it, and all, at least for one more time.
You had mentioned the FOP contract. We're like wanting to make this part, or when is that happening? Do we know the timeline on that?
I don't know the timeline of the negotiations. I know that the contract expired.
I think the new contract will be ratified in December.
Yeah, it's December. It expires in December 20th, Christmas Eve.
So we have at least another month that we could.
But they've already started, right?
I would assume they've already started negotiations.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process.
Right.
If we're going to have input, it needs to be, it doesn't have to be today, but it needs to be.
So we have another 30 days, don't you think, that we'd be safe to?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
I would assume we would. I don't have any input into that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have any knowledge.
Well, I mean, I don't want to, I'm not trying to prolong it so it's not feasible. I just would like at least another month to think on it, read on it, make sure that my thought processes are working right.
I recognize you don't have a crystal ball, but if we prolong it a month, does it still give the city council sufficient time to consider it and make it in time to be of relevance to the FOB contract process?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the city council meets every week. So it's a matter of, once we meet and get it in front of them, you just have to contact it and go from there, do the process, so.
Is anybody else interested in voting, taking a vote today?
I'm willing to take a vote today, but I'm also cognizant that, this was circulated to all of you, I think, on Monday. So I know that, and it's got some substance to it. So I want everybody to be comfortable with it.
Do we want to consider the focus on discipline for number 11, like was mentioned?
Actually, if you wanted to consider something today, as do it in part, I would probably suggest consideration of the arbitration and grievance provision recommendation, because that is more time
sensitive, yeah.
More time sensitive, and it doesn't require an identification of what is serious misconduct or what is excessive use of force. It is tied very specifically to the arbitration and grievance procedure. And so it could actually apply to all matter of complaints and discipline. the purpose there is to address matters for which there is litigation over how the police disciplined somebody. I view that as a different question. Thoughts?
I'm prepared to vote today because I consider this could be a capstone recommendation that we have made to date as a board. But I do respect what Sharon has said, and if we want to consider this the first reading and come back to it next month, I could support that as well. But I'm comfortable voting for it now.
Well, I'm a plotter, so I tend to want to think things through and make sure that I've got it together. So I'm sorry. That's my thought process. It takes me a little while to get to, I plod through things. So sorry about that. But
The compromise could be acting on the second recommendation on grievances and arbitration and get that on the record.
It could be.
And I concur. I mean, I'm ready to vote, but I don't want to be insensitive. I think whether I'm called an idiotic person or not doesn't matter to me, regardless. But in my mind, if the compromise is to move forward the arbitration and grievance process so that we do become possibly part of a consideration for the FOP, I don't want to lose that momentum or that opportunity, and still provide some kind of compromise to those that may still have some reservations about the other aspects of this first reading.
How about that someone on the board make a motion that goes something like this?
Since you can't?
What?
Since you can't?
Well, maybe I can, I don't know, but I'm just laying it out for discussion. That the board, I think the context of the discussion paper is an important context to go with the recommendations. And so I would like the board to adopt this discussion paper or a revised discussion paper, but a discussion paper as part of policy recommendations. But what I certainly could see the board doing is in a motion saying that the board defers consideration of the discussion paper and proposed resolution number 1 to the next meeting, but in the meantime adopts the second proposal as an affirmative recommendation of the board to the city manager and the city council. Would that make sense?
Very much so. And I think it's important to reference the entire discussion paper as part of the action.
All right. Well, I'll make the motion then. I think I can make it.
Okay.
I move that the board defer until next meeting a determination as to whether the discussion paper should be adopted as a statement of the board, and defers until the next meeting consideration of the recommended policy change in paragraph 10 of the discussion paper, but then affirmatively adopts as a policy recommendation of the board the policy as outlined, policy recommendation as outlined in paragraph 15 related to grievance and arbitration proceedings. Is there a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We need to do the discipline reviews, and I know that there may be some new business, but we've got to do the discipline reviews, or at least, Captain, how long will the discipline reviews take?
About 30 minutes.
30 minutes. All right. I move that the CRB recess into executive session for 30 minutes to receive information on case numbers 20 PSB 3957 and 20 PSB 3958 to discuss personnel matters of non-elected persons and to protect the privacy interest of identifiable individuals. The board will return from executive session no earlier than 5:58 and will reconvene here. Walt, you're the only one left. You have to leave, so. All right, thank you. we may have an item of new business. I don't know. We'll see. All right, the board is reconvening in open session. After completing the two case reviews, the board took no action and made no recommendations. The next item on the agenda is new business. Is there any new business? Well, there's no new business. We did have Walt with an idea, but that's, unless there's a board member to advance that, I suggest that we defer it.
Did you have something to advance on Walt's thing?
I think I need to wait till next month.
All right. Okay.
Get somewhere.
I think that's appropriate.
We can add it officially on the agenda, right? Instead of putting in new business, we can add this.
Absolutely. If you want to put that on the.
Yes, I do.
All right, we can do that next month then. Is there any other items of new business?
I do have a follow-up question related to what Walt has requested. Currently, that statistical report's being reviewed by Dr. Berzer at WSU, is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Actually, what Walt's requesting now is a different issue. That's the legal defense cost.
Oh, right.
I think I mentioned, but we had initially planned for an earlier meeting, and then this meeting, the presentation of the racial profiling data. I got a request directly through the chief that it be deferred because Dr. Berzer had not completed his review. And so, I mean, it ought to be done. So anyway, it's supposed to be done now next month.
Is he doing that on a volunteer basis or community service, or is he being paid to do it? If he's being paid, I think
he's being.
Yeah, I guess.
We might be able to prod a little bit more because we waited the first time around too.
Right. Anyway, we got the request from through Bob from the chief. I did, and they said they wanted to have it done before they did the presentation. I understand they've given Walt some data. So it's not like the data hasn't been shared, but it hasn't been packaged, I guess, analyzed or whatever. So right now, next month, it is, I think, the intention to have the racial profiling information on the agenda. So we'll have a full agenda. So, but that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Are there any other items of new business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're done. Thank you.